Those kind of guys change everything for your franchise and your team on the court and, frankly, value off the court.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Tsirkin. Coming up on the show today, round 2 of the NBA draft is tonight in Brooklyn. So how are teams jockeying to pick up new talent? Plus, a battle with algae in the reflecting pool is millions of dollars over budget. Why President Trump is playing the blame game as he kicks off America's 250th birthday party. Up first, though, they're calling it the Mamdani effect. Tuesday's primaries were a major victory for New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani and his allies, with 3 candidates that he endorsed winning their races. In New York's 7th district, you had state legislator Claire Valdez defeating Antonio Reynoso. In the 10th, former New York City Comptroller Brad Lander unseating Representative Dan Goldman with 2/3 the vote. And in the 13th, the 32-year-old Daria-Liza Avila Chevalier ousting the 5-term Representative Adriano Espaillat. So what can these wins tell us about Mamdani's influence and the anti-establishment energy that is within the Democratic Party right now? For that, I want to bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Tsirkin. Hey, Julie.
Hi, Yasmin. Thanks for having me.
So New York City Mayor Mamdani had a really good night when it came to his endorsements and his allies. How much of these victories are, in fact, a reflection of his support?
He had a great night. I would argue better than some had expected, especially in New York 13, in New York 7, where you really had these candidates. In some cases, like 13, you had Congressman Espaillat, who's the chair of the Hispanic caucus, who's so deeply ingrained with the Dominican community in his district that it was a shock to aides for Democratic leadership that I was talking to. And it just shows you how much power not only Mamdani has, the influence that he has on Democratic New Yorkers. And I want to be specific because we saw this in New York, might not translate to other states in the same way. But it cannot be ignored anymore. I think Democratic leaders here in DC, Democratic leaders in New York State have been trying to ignore it, Yasmin. But last night's victories, where the turnout numbers were about half of what they were at this point last year in Mamdani's race, and yet he still had the victories that we saw, I think that is extremely potent and a message that all Democrats should be listening to.
So one of the big issues that was talked about was the Israel and Gaza war, and it defined all 3 of these races, with Mamdani's endorsed candidates calling out Israel's conduct in Gaza as, quote, genocide. How did their opponents respond to how they characterized the war between Israel and Gaza? And what does that tell us about the views within the Democratic Party, or the shifting views within the Democratic Party?
Yeah, Israel was a central message in all of these races, but I'd argue it was not clear in any of these races like it was clear in New York 10. I interviewed Congressman Dan Goldman. This is what's so interesting. Obviously, he and Brad Lander, are both American Jews. They both support the idea of a Jewish state. For Goldman's case, he is very vocal in opposition to Israel's government, to Netanyahu, but he does believe in funding their Iron Dome and in continuing to provide them with funding for their offensive weapons. In Lander's case, he talked about this extensively at his victory party, Yasmin. He even read Hebrew scripture in saying that when he gets to Congress, he will make sure to amplify the Palestinians. And I heard over and over again among their constituents that on paper, Goldman and Lander, and this is true of many of the other races, they're progressive. They fight against ICE.
Right.
They fight against the Trump administration. Goldman was a rising Democratic star because he led the impeachment efforts against Trump. And what he told me, Yasmin, was that he's kind of surprised that now an issue abroad is so front and center instead of this underlying message that Democrats have had for the last decade, which is let's just take on Trump.
But again, important to note that it is, in fact, New York versus other states that we talk about throughout this country. Speaking of other states, because there were other races, right? We had upstate New York, which oftentimes is much different than, obviously, New York City. We have Utah, we had Maryland, we had South Carolina. Did we see any other kind of similar anti-establishment shocks in those races?
To an extent. For example, in Elise Stefanik's district, or her soon-to-be former district, of course, we had an important primary in the Republican side of the aisle yesterday, too. And the candidate that was backed by the state party, by Republicans in New York, in that part of New York especially, somebody who had experience in local government, that candidate lost to Anthony Constantino. He was a relative unknown, no experience in government, but guess what? He was completely behind President Trump, and Trump rewarded him with an endorsement, sending Rudy Giuliani to campaign for him. Jim Jordan went to this rural part of upstate New York. You could see this anti-establishment effect on both sides of the aisle. However, in places like Maryland, in Utah, the establishment candidate kind of won. I mean, in Steny Hoyer's district, for example, the outgoing, longtime serving congressman from Maryland, he was a Democratic leader. He threw his support behind Adrian Boafo. And in that case, Boafo won against many other Democratic opponents. In Utah, Ben McAdams, who was the last Democrat to hold that seat in 2021, he easily defeated a Bernie Sanders-backed candidate. So you don't see the same kind of trend in different states, but of course, what happened in New York is still very notable.
So if Mamdani's candidates actually do win in the general election, how would that change? How would that impact, I should say, Congress?
Yasmin, I don't think anyone at this point expects Mamdani's candidates, the Democrats, the Democratic Socialists who won yesterday, to lose because they represent extremely blue areas. So this primary race, this was where it's at. Right. The buck kind of stops with what happened yesterday. The general Republicans are really unlikely to win any of those seats. So it is going to change the Democratic makeup in the House. And it comes at a time, Yasmin, where Democrats are trying to energize their base or trying to figure out what's sticking. They still really haven't gotten
figure
there.
out what they stand for.
Figure out what they stand for. That's right. Hakeem Jeffries this morning was asked about the fact that you have now many more Democratic Socialists expanding that, what used to be a very small percentage of Democrats in the House. And he said they don't define the rest of the Democrats in the House. He still kind of tried to push himself away from those wins. He said, we stand on affordability. We stand on healthcare. Those are not really the issues that are motivating the base. And it's just wild to see in person.
Wild. Julie Tsirkin, thank you.
Thank you.
It is America's birthday, and President Trump is going to celebrate however he wants to, including tonight. President Trump's going to kick off the latest events in the birthday festivities with the Great American State Fair by holding what is expected to be a campaign-style event. The celebration is going to be 16 days on the National Mall and sponsored by the Trump-backed group Freedom 250. Meanwhile, workers around Washington, D.C., they're racing to finish the president's renovations on the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool as the price tag ticks up to $16 million. So how are the plans shaping up overall for the nation's birthday? And will Washington drama overshadow it? For this, I'm going to bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter, John Allen. Hi, John.
Hi, Yas.
So what are we expecting tonight at the Great American State Fair?
I mean, I think you'll be expecting a spectacle. I mean, the president wants that for America's 250th birthday. He wants people to look at the nation's capital in a different way and to credit him for the nation's capital looking extraordinary. Some of that has worked. Some of that has not worked. This was originally tonight going to be a concert with a lot of performers, many of whom backed out. And then I think you're going to hear the president talk about the 250th birthday. There's a Ferris wheel already out on the National Mall. I think he's going to talk about the 250th birthday, and it's anybody's guess as to what else he talks about. He often has a pet idea in mind that he wants to discuss. So whether that's the election bill that he wants to get done, or the Iran war, or just attacking his political opponents, your guess is as good as mine.
We're going to get into all the details of this, what's worked, what hasn't worked. You've said there have been some things that have gone right, and then there have been some things that have gone wrong. And we have talked about on this podcast the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, which is on the National Mall, and how the president wanted to be this, American flag blue, and then it turned green, and then the president accused folks of vandalism. The budget for that renovation, by the way, has gone up again. The budget for the reflecting pool now to $16 million. What is going on here, especially with these latest accusations coming from the president about vandals?
Well, let's just say that no federal agency has verified that there was vandalism, that there have been arrests, the things the president has said. He said that there was a 350-foot gash that vandals cut with a knife in the reflecting pool. And I want people to understand how big 350 feet is. That is more than a football field. And it is hard to imagine that happened without anyone observing it, given that the National Mall is being heavily patrolled right now by law enforcement.
Okay, so amidst all of this and the celebrations that are about to ensue on the National Mall, some of which are going to be incredible, the president has had quite a busy day on the Hill. And that is because there is this housing bill that has passed both the House and the Senate that we talked about in the show yesterday, that everybody thought once it hit the president's desk, that was it. It was going to be a law. And instead, the president is holding it up because of the SAVE Act, because of his election bill. And he wrote this on True Social. Today's housing news conference and signing is hereby canceled until such time as we pass the desperately needed Save America Act. Republican leadership is insisting they do not have the votes to pass the SAVE Act. So what's happening here? What is the president's strategy here? And how is this housing bill going to get across the finish line with the president holding it up?
This was a huge surprise today. He was supposed to go down to Capitol Hill, take a victory lap. 85 senators voted for this. 300 some odd House members voted for it. Overwhelming support for addressing at least one piece, or attempting to address at least one piece of the affordability crisis. This bill would make it easier to build houses. It would get rid of some regulations. It would provide incentives for home builders. And the president had an opportunity in his, heading into the midterms to give a pat on the back to the Republicans who are seeking reelection and to claim some victory with them. And he has decided to cancel his own party. I don't mean the Republican Party. I mean the party for the bill signing. The bill can become law in a couple ways. Number one, it can become law without his signature in 10 days if both chambers don't adjourn during that period. He could also choose to sign it, just not at the big party that they were going to throw on Capitol Hill for him today.
But he could veto it.
He could veto it actively, or he could, if both chambers go out for long enough, if they both adjourn for long enough, a pocket veto. But the truth is, and I'll say these numbers again, 85 senators voted for it. 85 out of 105 voted no. In the House, there were more than 300 votes for it. You only need 290 to get to 2/3 of the House. So there is a veto-proof majority for this bill in Congress, meaning if he vetoed it, it could be overridden. It would be an inconceivably large fumble by the Republican Party to not make this thing law.
John Allen, thank you. Hopefully you'll be able to celebrate over the next 16 days, which I'm sure you will.
We should all celebrate the 250th birthday of the greatest nation on earth.
And we are back with Here's the Scoop from NBC News. The NBA season just wrapped up. Go Knicks, by the way. Got to get one final one in. But for the rest of the league's teams, next year is already front and center with the 2026 NBA draft, which started last night. The Washington Wizards selected 19-year-old AJ Debonsa with the top pick overall. This morning, he joined my colleagues on the Today Show to talk about hearing his name called first.
No, it was super surreal. Obviously, you see it for years and years on TV. And for your name to get called, it's ridiculous.
But he was just the first of the first round, and there's more to come in round 2 tonight. So I want to bring in Kurt Heelan, lead NBA writer and managing editor for NBC Sports, to tell us what basketball fans are going to be watching for. Hi, Kurt.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Great to have you on. Okay, so the Wizards went with AJ. That was their first pick. He was a star player for BYU, but were you expecting him to be the first of the first NBA draft picked?
Yeah, this had been expected for a little while. It was really down to him and a guy named Darren Peterson, who went to Kansas and was taken second. But Debonsa was healthier through the last season and just had fewer questions about him. He is a dynamic player and a kind of franchise cornerstone guy. And at the end of the day, he's also about 5 inches taller than Peterson, and this is basketball, so that matters.
He's 6'9", by the way, and one of the top scorers in college basketball. You talked about Darren Peterson. He was a second pick, Utah Jazz. What are your expectations for Peterson?
He potentially is the best player in this draft, with all due respect to Debonsa. When they played this year, Kansas and BYU played each other. And for the first half of that game, Peterson was clearly the better player. The second half of that game, Peterson didn't play because of cramping issues. And that's what had teams a little bit concerned and gave them pause. But Peterson has the potential to be an iconic and best player in this class. Like this is an incredibly deep draft class, and he could very well be the best of them.
Here's the thing, though. The Wizards and the Jazz did not do well last season, right? The Wizards, I believe, they only won 17 games. The Jazz won 22. Do superstars like Peterson and Bonsa, are they going to change the game literally and figuratively for teams that were struggling this past season?
Yes, not instantly necessarily, but look, basketball more than any other sport, if you have one of those guys, one of those 10, 15 best players, likely just not just in the NBA, but in the world, if you have your LeBron James or your Victor Wembanyama or your whomever, even if it's Cade Cunningham in Detroit, those kind of guys change everything for your franchise and your team on the court and, frankly, value off the court. These guys can absolutely be those kind of guys. Well, it probably raises the game for the other team members as well. Like when you play a sport, when you play with someone who's better than you, you get better. And both of these guys are good at helping those raise up the people around them, kind of like LeBron, right? Who's an incredible passer. Both of these guys have that kind of skill, and they lift everybody around them. And they're both going to teams that kind of saw this coming and saw the other changes in the NBA that were coming and wanted to be better next year. They both have poised to have a couple of all-star players, veterans around them now. But the ball is going to be in their hands. There's going to be a lot asked of these guys because they're seen as the future of these franchises.
How are the Knicks looking for next season? Just asking for those that are very concerned.
Very concerned and happen to be at a microphone in that room.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And have some skin in the game, i.e. a tried and true New Yorker.
Look, they're bringing back the band as best they can. They might lose a guy on the fringe or two, but they really want to bring back Landry Shamet and Mitchell Robinson and some of these guys. They're largely running it back with Jalen Brunson, with the whole core at the top, and betting that the magic that they had during that run, when everything just came together for them and clicked at the right time and led to such an amazing experience, they're betting that magic can be recaptured.
Kurt Heelan, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vestugin. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.